If somebody called me today and said, here's this huge check, we want you to come in and do this, I would, for the first time in 30, however many years, can't do the math now, 31, 32, I don't know, however many, I wouldn't do it because it's that time.
What's up, Bengal fans? It's your host, Joey Karni, and I want to thank you for clicking on this video. It was an amazing experience, and I can't wait for you to watch the full episode and enjoy it just as much as I did filming it. Now, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe down below to stay up to date with all the Angles activity right here on YouTube. Now enjoy the show.
Let's go, let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest at this time, he is a WWE Hall of Famer. He's one of the most controversial figures in the history of professional wrestling. And if we know anything about professional wrestling, it's that controversy creates cash. Now, this man can easily be labeled the Buffalo Bill Cody of professional wrestling. Please welcome Eric Bischoff. How are you?
I am very well. Great intro, by the way. And I love the Buffalo Bill Cody reference. So the Buffalo Bill Cody at the turn of the century, the 19th century and 20th century, was, turn of the 20th century at least, was one of the most well-known figures in America. He was Elvis before Elvis. He was the Beatles before Beatles. He was Bill Gates before Bill Gates. So and he was Vince McMahon before Vince McMahon, or Barnum and Bailey before Barnum and Bailey. So yeah, I appreciate the reference, but I do not live up to that level. But thank you anyway. I'll take it.
No problem. I did some traveling last year on the West Coast, and his name repeatedly came up in different places. So, and I knew that you were a fan of his, so I had to just, throw that in there.
No, I appreciate that. He was a really interesting character. People don't realize it, but when you think of, live events and performances and the significance of American culture on other countries, Buffalo Bill Cody took his Wild West show.
Yeah.
When you think about Buffalo Bill Cody, he rode when he was 14 years old. He was one of the very first riders in the Pony Express at 14 years old.
Wow.
And served as a scout in the Army. And, I think he won was it the Congressional Medal of Honor or some very significant medal for his efforts with the government. And then went on, after the Indian Wars were more or less over, or at least ostensibly so, brought many of the most well-known Native Americans that up until 10 or 15 years prior to that time, the government was at war with. He aggregated and brought those people together and toured the world with them. The Buffalo Bill Cody Wild West show was predominant in England and France and throughout Europe, South America. So, he was the Elvis of America before Elvis.
Of course, and that's why I made the reference to you, because you've been such a sort of Elvis showman type of character in the world of professional wrestling for such a long time. I mean, since you came in, you were front and center. So it is a much needed reference there. But you've had a busy last week being a part of AEW's Friday Dynamite episode. By the way, love seeing you a part of the show. Love seeing you in front of a live crowd again. They went nuts for you like always. But how did that opportunity come about? Like, did you get a call from Chris Jericho or Cody? Like, how did that come about for you?
I got a text from Cody. This is my fourth appearance at AEW. Yeah. So, there's no need to stand on ceremony and make a big deal out of it, with regard to the communication between us.
Yeah.
I got a text from Cody asking me, if I was available, and I checked my schedule. I told him I was available. He said, great. And we booked it, confirmed everything. And then a couple of days before, I got a little bit of a heads up of what the creative would be, and an airline ticket and a hotel reservation, and off I went, man. It was pretty simple.
Awesome. And to be a part of that show, the crowd was absolutely fantastic. And now when you were waiting to make your entrance, on that show, what was the atmosphere like backstage? Because seeing the fans react the way they did that entire show, it's been a while since we had, fans first off, but a reaction like that on a wrestling show. So what was the initial reaction to, waiting in the backstage area, waiting to be called out and just hearing the roar of the crowd?
Not to, sound like I'm dismissing it all, but I've been there, done that a couple times in venues and at events that were much more intense and much larger. So it was not an unusual environment for me. I kind of felt like, okay, this is the way shit's supposed to be. You're supposed to hear the crowd getting crazy. You're supposed to feel the energy backstage. It shouldn't be unusual. And to me, it wasn't, because, I've made a couple appearances now in the COVID environment, and, have recognized the lack of crowd, certainly. But for 30 plus years, I've been more used to crowd and energy. So to me, it was just kind of like, okay, cool. Now things are kind of back the way they should be. So but it didn't really stand out to me because I've done it once or twice.
Now I'm going to kind of jump around here throughout your career, so don't mind the questions being all over. But in 2002, you made the scandalous move to WWE, one of the most shocking debuts, I think, in the history of the company. Is there a story that always stands out to you about the time you came in, like maybe people's reactions or people being worried that, Eric Bischoff was coming in? Like, do you have something that stands out to you most during that time?
Not really. The whole thing was a little surreal and exciting all at the same time. If I think about moments, and that's kind of what I tend to do, it's like, okay, what's the one moment that I remember most vividly? It would be when I was sitting in the limo, because the limo came to my hotel to pick me up. And keep in mind, very few people knew that I was going to be the person being introduced as a general manager. That was something that we worked pretty hard to coordinate, between myself, but more importantly, WWE. It was a very well kept secret. And I got to the building early, and the limo pulled into the arena, and I sat in that limo for, I don't know, can't remember for sure, maybe an hour and a half prior to the show, to make sure that I got there on time and all that. And during that time, I never left the limo because nobody was supposed to know that it was me. And it was the first time that I ever felt like a monkey in a zoo, because as I was sitting in the limo and I'm looking out the window backstage, and I'm seeing everybody, going back and forth, and 80% of them are ignoring the limo because they've been there for a while. And it's like, yeah, well, whatever. Somebody's in a limo. Whatever. We got work to do. Who cares, right? But every so often, some of the long-term employees, not senior management, but others, would come in, and it's like they thought I couldn't see them peeking in the window. I'm looking right at them, and I see their face pressed up against the window, trying to see who was inside the limo. And I think, man, this is what monkeys feel like in a zoo. I was waiting for somebody to throw me a banana or something, some peanuts.
Wow. I'm sure everybody was excited. I mean, when you came out, it was a surreal moment to see you debut with WWE. But you've been in a place of power in a lot of wrestling promotions, thriving, honestly, while doing so, thriving. Do you have one decision that stands out to you most, that you're most proud of?
It's hard to, pinpoint one decision.
Yeah.
I think it would be more fair to try to describe one choice. And that choice involves several decisions.
Yeah.
Kind of go through the checklist and check that box, check that box, check that box. Okay, now I have to make a choice. And I think that choice was to embrace the spontaneity, surprise, embrace the idea that anything can happen on any given show at Nitro. I think that philosophy, which is probably what it is more than anything else, was the right decision at the right time that allowed for so many really cool things to happen, including the NWO and Lex Luger showing up, when everybody thought he was still working for WWE, and
Yeah.
all the crazy things that we did to try to satisfy the audience's need or desire for a surprise. You're watching live television, ostensibly you're watching it because it's live and anything can happen on a live TV show. And I think the more things that one can do to kind of feed into that philosophy, the better off you are. And
Yeah.
I didn't have any experience, man. I was learning this shit on the job. I was learning on the fly for the most part. And I think embracing that decision or that choice to focus on spontaneity, or as I used to refer to it as spontaneous combustion, is what laid the groundwork for what made Nitro so successful.
Now, on the back end of that, I mean, making a lot of different choices throughout your career, is there one that really maybe doesn't sit well with you that you made, that not a regret, something that just hasn't sat well with you?
Oh yeah, man. Of course. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody alive that you could ask that question to that couldn't point to dozens or hundreds of choices and decisions that one makes throughout their careers.
Yeah.
That you don't regret. I can't pinpoint one. I can pinpoint some, personal choices that I made that I really regret, because those are, a bigger part of me. But business decisions and choices, no, I guess the best answer would be there were too many to recall.
Good.
That's life.
Exactly.
You can't go through life. You can't go through, I don't think, at least, I don't think anybody can go through life trying to be successful and fighting to become successful and fighting to build something without making mistakes along the way. The question is, what do you do with that? Do you beat yourself up over it? Do you, flog yourself, which is the same thing as beating yourself up, I guess. Do you let that inhibit you from taking risks in the future? Do you let it really affect your judgment? Or do you go, okay, that was fucked up. Wish I wouldn't have done that. What did I learn from that? What do I never want to do again? That's what I don't ever want to do again. And this is my lesson, and move on. So, bad choices, bad decisions can either be, debilitating, or they can be a learning experience. I've always tried to make them a learning experience.
And that's honestly the best thing that you can do. You can either thrive off the lesson and hopefully make sure it doesn't happen again, or ultimately just let it affect you and let it drown you. And
I think that it happens too often, in life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it, in your personal life, decide you're going to take a chance and try to establish a relationship with somebody, and you finally muster up the courage and it doesn't work out for you. And, maybe that tends to make you less willing to take chances like that in the future. And that can affect your personal growth and your personal choices in life. In business, same thing. You can take a big risk and get your ass kicked and decide, okay, I'm never, ever going to take another big risk. Well, chances are you'll never, ever really be truly successful either. If you take comfort in that kind of shelter. So it's just, everybody's different, man. Everybody reacts to things differently.
now, a couple of years ago, when you were brought in as the creative director in WWE, did you have an initial vision for what you wanted for the show?
No, I didn't. One of the things, I've only talked about this once before, I wasn't focused or thinking about creative. I was, let me take that back. But I was thinking about the formula for creative.
Yeah.
Not specific, oh, what if we have this guy wrestle this guy, or this woman wrestle this woman? None of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't like matchmaking in my head at all. I had no interest in that at all.
Yeah.
But I've learned over the years that through trial and error, success and failure, the experience that I've gained in success and the experience that I've gained in failure, that there's a better way to approach creative.
Yeah.
From a formula perspective. And I still, in my mind, at least, feel like there is a method to the madness that could have much more success than just madness.
Yeah.
And to me, madness is just, hey, I got an idea. This guy's really over. This guy's really over. This girl's really over. This girl's really over. Let's build a storyline between them and see what happens. That's an experiment.
Yeah.
That's just throwing, obvious two people that you think are over and throwing that up against the wall and hoping that it sticks as a story.
Yeah.
Well, you can throw two people that are over, whatever that means in today's world. You could throw two people that are in a story, and if the story, they may be over, they may be very popular characters and great performers. But if the story isn't well formulated and well designed, then it's just an experiment. You're just throwing shit up against the wall and hoping that it sticks.
Yeah.
That's random shit. That's like going to Vegas and pumping quarters into a slot machine. Whereas if you have a formula that you really have thought through and you believe can work, and there's a method to the madness behind it, then the odds of that story with those two same individuals being successful go from being random shit up against the wall to maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40, maybe 70-30.
Yeah.
And I think increasing the likelihood of success with a formula that's designed specifically for a wrestling audience, I think that formula would increase the success of wrestling companies exponentially. And that's what I was hoping to do when I got to WWE. Unfortunately, I wasn't there long enough to get a shot at that, but that was my only kind of creative goal. And I expressed that, when I was talking to Vince, before I agreed to come in, or he agreed to offer me the job, I talked about that a little bit. I didn't go into depth on it.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because I still think, I see what's going on. I want everything to be exciting. I want wrestling to be as exciting as it was back in the mid to late 90s for the audience. And I don't give two shits about, well, there's more ways to watch TV now. Fuck that noise. There is not more energy about wrestling today, regardless of how you watch it, where you watch it. There's just not as much passion for the product today as there was back in the 90s. And I think that's because the stories don't resonate. They just don't. People are just throwing shit up against the wall and hoping it sticks because the people involved are quote unquote over.
Yeah. Or they're going to sell merchandise. But having that sort of like template as to where you can build a story around, I mean, that leads to, likely having other directions available to you, knowing that there's a plan in place. It gives you different options. And I think that's one thing that we're missing today was if it doesn't work, it's gone. And if it does work, well, they just give you the same thing over and over. And like you said, the story, there's no investment in the fans, at least in me being a fan's perspective.
We agree on that.
Was there any, or did they tell you any plan behind putting you and Paul Heyman in charge of the creative, maybe bringing the on-screen characters back? Because I remember when you both were announced as the creative directors, there was a major buzz all across, social media and the internet that, the two rivals are coming back, in charge. And any idea of possibly bringing the characters back?
None. In fact, I kind of made it clear early on in the initial conversations that I really wasn't interested in being an on-camera character.
Yeah.
I've done it. I've learned the hard way, if you will, that you can either you have to make a choice, in my opinion. are you an on-camera character or are you an executive? And especially when it comes to creative, because you're too deeply involved in creative, and then to be that deeply involved in creative and be an on-camera character creates a conflict of interest, either perceived or in reality.
Yeah.
And I didn't want, I'd already done that, man. I've had all the fun I can have being an on-camera character. I'll never be able to have more fun than I've already had in WCW and WWE, even on a limited basis in TNA, having the ability to work with my son.
Yeah.
So I like showing up every once in a while. I like to put my toe in the water, but I have no desire to get in the pool.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
So my focus was really on trying to be the best executive I could be and not be distracted or conflicted with the issues that were sure to arise had I been an on-camera character as well.
Now, I could speak for hours, and I'm sure you can too, about what's going on with Monday Night Raw, All Today with Creative.
I couldn't because I don't watch it that much, but go ahead.
And I guess the issues behind the creative on the show. In your opinion, do you think, being that you are probably you are the best general manager that we've ever seen in WWE, do you think that is potentially missing from the WWE today?
No. I think the general manager role it was overdone in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
It was overdone by the time I did it. And it worked. I'm not going to deny it. It worked for a brief period of time, but that's not what's missing. What's missing is compelling story. It's not any one personality, any one character. It's a combination of things, but at the root of it all, it's about story and structure and whether or not you're engaging the audience. And I go off on these, I talk about these things and I'm somewhat vague because if I get into the nitty gritty of it, it gets really fucking boring and it'd be a 4-hour show. But any movie, book, even the My Pillow commercial, Mike Lindell, even anything that works has a formula.
Yeah.
Anything. And especially when it comes to scripted entertainment. And let's be honest, wrestling is still kind of viewed as its own little weird world. It's scripted, but it's kind of not.
Yeah.
Actually, in most cases, it's, at least in WWE, it's very scripted.
Yeah.
And when you have scripted entertainment that doesn't follow any formula or pattern that has worked in movies and books and My Pillow commercials and just about anything else that really works that the audience connects with, you're missing the freaking boat.
Yeah.
George Lucas, I think it was George Lucas. He was the one that produced Star Wars, right? Created Star Wars, George Lucas.
I think so.
Fuck, that was a long time ago. I don't know what the movie was. I think it was Star Wars. I'm not a movie buff, but I am a book buff and I read a little bit. And there's a writer that talked about formula and how it applies to storytelling. And in the book, the author would talk about how storytelling has been around since cavemen, drew pictures on caves of the great hunt.
Yeah.
And there's always a formula to that. And the formula and storytelling formulas have evolved over the decades. Joseph Campbell, by the way, is the author, if you want to look it up. So the book is called The Hero's Journey. And George Lucas, used basically that book and that formula to create one of the most successful film franchises in the last, 30, 40, 50 years. And so does a lot of other people. And it's a formula that's really freaking simple. You don't have to be, you don't have to study, film writing at Harvard to figure this shit out. You just got to pick up a $4 book and read it and then figure out what you could do to apply to whatever your endeavor is, whether it's wrestling or a My Pillow commercial or anything else. And reading and studying Joseph Campbell, and I don't want to make it sound like I spent, weeks studying this stuff, but I read the book, I thought about, okay, how does that apply to wrestling? Because wrestling is a unique animal. It has, the wrestling audience is a somewhat unique audience. And you have to be a little bit of aware of what makes a wrestling audience tick psychologically. But 80% of what I read in that book applies to wrestling in terms of basic formula and structure. And it just amazes me to this day why nobody embraces that. That was my goal, going into WWE. I sit back and I watch what people do now, and fuck, it's so simple. You're missing the boat.
Yeah. And one of the biggest moments, I think, during your TNA time was Bound for Glory. Hulk Hogan, turns, joining forces with you. Jeff Hardy wins the world championship. During that time, was there ever another suitable character before Jeff Hardy was chosen for that position?
Oh, there again. Yeah, absolutely. There's probably half a dozen people that could have fit that role, depending on the story.
Yeah.
And God, I know you don't know you did it, or you certainly didn't mean to do it, but you just pinpointed the biggest problem in wrestling is if there's a story or an idea, you have to have the exact right person to execute it.
Exactly.
And I believe I believe the opposite. You don't have to have the exact right person. You have to have the exact right story, which will allow any number of people. If the backstory that leads up to that moment is sufficient and it's compelling and you've engaged the audience with it. Now, naturally, whoever you plug into that has to have the ability physically and as a performer to live up to it.
Yeah.
But there were half a dozen people that had that ability. They couldn't do exactly the same things that Jeff could do or was known for doing, but they each had their own unique abilities and capabilities that would have allowed any one of them to fit into that role had the story been designed correctly.
Yeah.
As opposed to just relying on the shocking moment of this one guy. Now you're throwing that shit up against the wall again. Jeff Hardy's over. That'd be fucking awesome. Let's do that without any real consideration to the backstory. The backstory is an afterthought. This is something you come up with, as you go.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of how it should be.
No, and it's cool that we're talking about it because you see both sides of the spectrum here. And I can agree with both in a sense, but I definitely agree with what you're saying, that the story, there needs to be a story. There needs to be some sort of story before even choose, or really a character you could you could build a story around. So I totally understand what you're saying there. Now, jumping forward to your most recent Hall of Fame induction, after finding out that you'd be inducted into the WWE 2021 class, was there any conversation after that segment on After the Bell with maybe like Vince or Triple H, kind of just summarizing exactly like their feelings for you?
No, it was very, no, not prior to the induction, certainly after, during the induction, when I was in Gorilla right before I went out, I had a nice conversation with Triple H and had a couple conversations with Vince that were very personal and, made the entire experience, even more special. But nothing happened before the induction. It was really during and after.
Yeah. And I think that's what made it so special too, is seeing the authentic reaction on that podcast episode. It was really, really special, especially like I said, you being such a huge figure in professional wrestling, to see that happen. All wrestling fans were excited for that. But
the reaction, on the podcast with Corey, it was kind of weird. It was unexpected, because I kind of knew what was coming. It's not like it was a big surprise, but it's really weird. There's certain things that when I talk about them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, didn't really affect me emotionally. because of where I was at in my life.
Yeah.
Now, if I talk about Dusty Rhodes, for example, it's hard for me sometimes to talk about Dusty in any depth, because meeting Dusty, coming to WCW and then meeting Dusty and kind of, I don't want to say mentored, but Dusty really took me under his wing. That was such a special time in my life.
Yeah.
And it was the catalyst for so many other really big, special things that I hold that period of time, that relationship, or those memories with Dusty in a very special regard.
Yeah.
Not that they were the most significant things in my life, but they were really important and very special. So when I think about them now, it reminds me of so many moments in my life that I've had the pleasure of experiencing.
Yeah.
They mean more to me now than they ever have. Just because I can look at things differently. I'm not in the middle of it anymore. You know what I mean? I'm not in the fight.
Outside.
I don't want to be in the business, full time. I'm not competing for anything. My ego is fine. I don't really give a fuck what anybody thinks about me anymore. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
In my life, it certainly doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me in any way. And because I've kind of distanced myself from it all, it's given me the ability to really have a clearer perspective on the things that were actually really important.
Yeah.
And some of them are big, and some of them are what would appear to be to other people to be very insignificant.
Yeah.
But those moments have more meaning to me now, and I connect with them in a different way. And that's what happened, when I talked to Corey. The reality of, is the reality of, wow, they're actually going to induct me in the WWE Hall of Fame. And it wasn't my ego or my pride so much. It was, I'm getting invited to a party where a bunch of people that I've looked up to all my life, that's where they're at. I'm in the same Hall of Fame as Andre the Giant, who although I met him briefly, it was, not really noteworthy. I can't say I've never met him, because technically I did, but I never got to know him.
Yeah.
But as a fan, as a kid growing up, man, are you kidding me? Andre the Giant?
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan is one of my best friends. Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, and so many more names. I hate mentioning names because there's a bunch of names I don't mention and people or think I'm a dick, but there's too many to name. But just to get invited to that party, it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. I've had a pretty good life, had a pretty good career. I got invited to the party. They gave me a ticket. I get to go. It's pretty cool.
And that kind of leads to my next question. I mean, now that it's a few months later from the Hall of Fame induction, those moments of waiting in Gorilla to go out before you're inducted, or just overall now just fully embracing it. What does it mean to you now, being a little time after, like you just said, what does it mean to you seeing it now from the outside?
Oh, it's hard to describe it. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I've been thinking about that a lot, and it's just interesting because I think for the last 6 months or a year of my life, maybe a little longer, I finally have gone, you know what? That's in my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I want to be really honest with you here. I've never had this conversation, on a podcast with anybody. Even though I've been out of the business, as a full-time person when was the last time I was full-time? Probably 6 or 7 years ago, I guess. 2014, something like that. Even though I was out of the business full-time, say starting in 2014, I dabbled in it a little bit. I got, I do a little thing here, do a little thing there. Still very interested in the business, doing my podcast, which kind of keeps me a little bit connected to the industry in a way. very, very indirectly, but still, talking about it and thinking about it. But for the last year and a half, it's kind of like, you know what? I really, if somebody called me today and said, here's this huge check, we want you to come in and do this, I would, for the first time in 30, however many years, can't do the math now, 31, 32, I don't know, however many, I wouldn't do it because it's that time to mentally and emotionally walk away from it.
Wow.
And not in a way like I'm angry or resentful or frustrated. It's just when you've done everything that you're really going to do and you did it at the highest levels.
Yeah.
There's a certain comfort in just going, enough. I'm going to sit back and watch. I'll put my toe in the water every once in a while, but I'm not going to take a bath.
Yeah.
I'm not going to overcommit. I'm just going to have fun with it. And that's where I'm at. And I just enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching, I was in AEW last week. I went down for Dynamite a little over a week ago. And I had a blast. But the most fun I had was watching everybody else have fun. The most fun I had was watching the anticipation and the excitement and the effort from, people that were 25 or 26 years old that weren't even around when I was doing my shit, but still knew about it, so it was important to them. And watching them grow, there's certain talent that I watch, and I don't watch them to see who wins or who loses, but I watch them to see how they evolve as performers or characters.
Yeah.
Their ability on the mic. Those are the things that I watch for and enjoy when I watch wrestling. And I don't watch much of it anymore. I'll drop in here, I'll drop in there. If I hear something coming up that, okay, I want to see how that plays out, I'll drop in and I'll follow it. But I'm not going to lie. I've never sat down and watched a 3-hour wrestling show since I was producing them.
Wow.
Just can't.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
And honestly, that's an incredible place to be in, because very well in professional wrestling, it's very hard for people to, say that's it and actually walk away without coming back, or, everybody retires multiple times in wrestling, really. So that's really an incredible place to be, where you're happy with what you did, and just to be able to go back every once in a while and, get that refreshment but not be fully in it. It's incredible.
And here's the best way to characterize it. I think, if I get a call from WWE to do an appearance or to be in a video or whatever, or I get a call from AEW, I'm always excited to do that because I love to perform. I still love getting out in front of a camera and seeing if I can make people react. I'll probably never lose that, but I don't need it. If that opportunity is there, I'm more than happy to, go out and have a little bit of fun for a night. But I don't, if it never happens again, I'm cool with that too.
Yeah.
And that's a freedom, I think. And I think you're right. This is funny. We're having this conversation because I was just thinking about this. I've been watching some of the Dark Side of the Ring, and some of those sad stories are people that I've known, and were my peers in the business. And I've seen so many people that they never reached that point where they could go, you know what? I had a great career. I'm really proud of it. I'm satisfied with it. And now I can, in a very healthy way, look at it and move away from it. And there are some, believe me, and some of them are close friends of mine.
Yeah.
But too many people get it. And I don't think it's unique to wrestling, by the way. I think actors, actresses, one kind of microcosm, I guess, that you can look at and go, oh, okay, I get that. Look at what happens to a lot of child actors who reach this huge level of success and notoriety, and people fawn over them, and everybody recognizes them. They want their autograph. They're making money until they're about 16 or 18, and that goes away.
Yeah.
And they don't know what else to do. And they don't feel like they fulfilled anything, even though they had a tremendous amount of success. But because they were young and immature and hadn't developed emotionally and didn't have good people around them, so many of them are constantly chasing that feeling throughout their adult lives. And some of them never get it. Many of them, well, most of them never really achieve it. And some of them, unfortunately, get themselves in trouble as a result or worse.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens in wrestling. Certain people can go, okay, I did everything I could do. I gave it my shot. I had fun. I got to travel. I got to perform in front of a crowd. I made some amazing friends, but now it's time for me to go do something else and literally leave it behind you in a positive way.
Yeah.
Too many people can't do that, and they hang on to it because that was the only identity they really ever had.
It becomes unhealthy. Yeah.
Was basically an illusion. It wasn't real.
Yeah.
I mean, their talents were real, their efforts were real, but the reaction or the support from the audience was a perception.
Yeah.
And they just can't let go of the perception.
Yeah. Now, talking about full circle moments, a lot of our chat here has really been about full circle moments. And due to the pandemic, they weren't able to induct the 2020 class when they were supposed to go in. So they initially inducted the 2020 and the 2021 class this year. And coincidentally, you were inducted alongside the NWO. What did it mean for you to be in and also see them go in as well, kind of at the same time?
Yeah, it was kind of like a double whammy, right? It was a double header for me, because I created that shit.
Yeah.
And all those guys, Scott Hall, especially, not especially, but Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan. Hulk is one of my best friends for sure. Kevin and I stay in touch. I love Scott. We don't stay in touch. Scott's kind of an independent dude. He's a bit of a loner nowadays, but I have nothing but love for Scott and respect for Scott, more now than ever, because I know more about him now and his challenges. To see those guys, X-Pac, same thing, man. To see those guys go in, I would have been happy just to be, if there would have been an audience, to be sitting in the audience and just watching that. I would have lived vicariously through them. I would not have needed to be up there with them in order to feel as strongly as I did about it. But to be inducted essentially in the same WrestleMania, different class, same WrestleMania, was just like, okay, this is pretty fucking cool when you think about it.
Yeah. Not everybody gets to have that moment where something that they created that was extremely successful, get the same honor as them at the same time. So, I mean, that's incredible. And speaking of the NWO, you have an innate ability to really create factions. I mean, the NWO, one of the greatest ever. In your opinion, if you could create a faction in today's generation of wrestling, do you know who it would who would it entail?
No, I wouldn't even attempt it. I think factions everybody's been trying to, recreate the NWO since the NWO. And I you just can't, man.
Yeah.
Here's the bad news. The good news. Here's the good news. The good news is I think NWO will go down in history as one of the greatest storylines / factions in the history of the wrestling business. The fact that they're still selling NWO merchandise to this day, 25 years later, and it's one of the highest selling items in the WWE catalog, by the way, proves my point. Whether you agree with me, disagree with me, like me, hate me, doesn't make a fuck. The numbers tell the story.
Yeah.
And what I said is a fact. The NWO merchandise is one of the highest selling items in the WWE catalog 25 years after it happened.
Yeah.
But the bad news is every effort that keeps coming along pales in comparison. And I think the only way to overcome that or to manage that is to just let it rest.
Yeah.
Let's just not have any more factions for a few years so that when one comes along, it feels fresh and doesn't feel like an attempt to be the NWO.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. Everything gets compared to it. You can only be, there's only one first man on the moon. Nobody remembers the third guy in the moon, or the fourth, or the fifth, or the 10th. I don't even know. Was there 10? I don't fucking know. But you get my point.
Of course. Yeah. And at the end of my interviews, I like to ask the same question because I'm always interested in the response. And that is, when your legacy, what would you want your legacy to be once you officially step away from professional wrestling for good? What do you want to be remembered?
I think I've officially, I mean, I think the only way I could officially step away any further is when I get planted in the ground. But, you know, hopefully people recognize the fact that I broke the mold. I took risks. Some of them worked out really, really well. Some of them changed the industry as we know it and still exists to this day. And some of them sucked. But again, take the good with the bad, man. And at least I took the risk. And the ones that worked really well and are probably responsible, at least in some part, to the success of the industry today.
Yeah. It's a great way to leave it. Now, for the fans listening and watching right now, where could they get more of Eric Bischoff? Where could they go listen to 83 Weeks? Where could they just find Eric Bischoff on social media?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at eBischoff. You can find me every Monday morning on 83 Weeks, the podcast I do with Conrad Thompson, which you can find on anywhere you get your podcast. Doesn't matter. Adfreeshows.com is a fun place that I like to hang out and interact with people. So those are the best options.
Awesome. Eric, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. You're an inspiration to all podcasters, and really, I think people trying to break into the wrestling business. And I appreciate everything you've done for the business. And again, it's been an honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
All right, man. Thank you. And thanks for staying consistent. I know you were trying to get to me a couple times, and, you know, persistence pays off, man. I respect that and enjoy doing this with you, man. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch. Thanks.
All right. Be well.
And before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below to stay up to date with the next big interview right here on the Angle Podcast.